Okay. Well, hello. I'm Fiona Phipps. I'm the Senior Disability Advisor at Royal Far West, and I've spent a lot of years working in not only the early intervention sector, but across the disability sector, and particularly, as I said, early intervention, but school-age children as well. So today's presentation is really about how we make sure that therapy, particularly delivered via the new modalities, what we call here telecare, actually enhances and promotes programs and best practice principles. And I'm really using the early intervention, early childhood principles for that as an example. So I hope you enjoy. It's certainly quite a challenge to deliver using this new modality, and I'll discuss some of those things a little bit later on. So welcome again, everybody. And as I said, whilst the title says early intervention, it's really about services to absolutely any child. These principles of best practice don't disappear when a child turns 7. It is and should be a key driver of any delivery of service to children with a disability. At the core of our program is capacity building, and that's there primarily for rural and remote families because of the great difficulties they have. So imagine having to travel 2 hours to access your speech pathologist. Your child's exhausted when they arrive, they're cranky, they don't want to do anything. You spend half an hour battling with them. The next half an hour is about engaging with a therapist. Then you pack up and go home and drive 2.5 hours home, pick up your other children that mum or some other wonderful friends minding for you for the afternoon, get home, cook dinner, and at the end of the day sit down and think, well, what on earth did I do in that therapy session, and what can I remember about that, and how can I work with my child? So Windmill services were built primarily around capacity building. So initially, as a sort of aside from our PDP program, our Paediatric Development Program, we developed the Windmill Immersion Week. So families come to Sydney, to our site in Manly, access the service for up to 15 sessions of however makeup they want. So we have speechies, OTs, psychologists, special educators, and create a week of service, so up to 3 sessions a day. This the families absolutely love because they have the opportunity to practice those skills with the therapist, see how it goes overnight, come back, go over what they learned, what they forgot, if they're anything like me, how many things did they not remember, but also to watch their child respond and work with the therapist that they might be working with. It's proven to be hugely successful, and all families who have been accessing this program have reported how important it has been in their growth, in terms of their growth and their understanding not only of their child's disability, but how to then work with their child. Our Windmill Telecare program was born out of that need of continuing therapy. So it stands alone, or it can have, as the diagram shows, interlocking pieces between the immersion week and then moving on to telecare, coming back into the immersion week, more telecare. It is, though, single discipline, so it's not delivered in an interdisciplinary way, which the Windmill Immersion Week is. It still, though, has incredible power and is also proving very, very popular as families access this in the school, preschool or at home, whereas previously they had nothing. Again, capacity building for them, as well as a school support person who will be sitting alongside the child. And we then developed camps, which have a therapeutic basis. So looking at a lot of heavy work from the OTs, a lot of work from the social workers in terms of mindfulness and awareness of themselves, and those small group activities that are about turn taking and respect for each other, as well as some parent groups happening in there. Again, we find that families who access those programs then often move on to telecare. They might come also back for a Windmill Immersion Week to really cement some of the things that they've learnt during that time. It was really interesting. We've been doing some evaluation of the program to date, and 13 families that had accessed in 2 weeks that we were looking at all reported how much more engaged they were with their child and how they felt that they had new tools to continue with their work at home, which shows that they're actually doing something right, which is very nice. So the 7 early intervention principles, which, as I said, are not exclusively for early intervention, but move across the continuum. And as you can see in this picture, it's showing the therapist and child. I like to think that it's a therapist is the young man holding the child, and it's mum that's moving the beads, but I hazard a guess that it's actually the other way around. And they're obviously in an office working on a toy that's there. So part of our delivery of service being delivered into preschool or home, the person sitting there with the child is either the parent or the EC, early child care, but they're in their natural surroundings. So they have the toys, the equipment that are around them and that can be used in that natural environment. The therapist can't pull out of their bag of tricks, their magic bag, a toy that disappears at the end of the session and can't be used in between, but is actually something that is there for that family. So that beady thing over in the corner, which I personally hate, wouldn't be something that you would be using. You would be using some more natural things that might be occurring there in that environment. Might be functional skills such as threading strawberries on toothpicks or pieces of banana or whatever it might be. So there's a functional element to it, but also in that natural environment of where it may occur. This, of course, is not what telecare looks like, this little person with their iPad, but it does show the incredible power that it has as a learning tool. The principle of providing for families necessary supports and resources families can enhance their child's natural learning and development is a really important concept. So again, part of that capacity building, part of our Windmill delivery is that each family learns how to work with their child as the telecare therapist isn't able to do it. The principle of providing those necessary supports is, as I said previously, inherent in the capacity building with a capacity building lens applied over. Necessary supports is not just physical toys or a strategy, it's that development of relationships as well. Dr. Rochelle Shealy, who's the wife of Stephen Goodstein, who developed the RDI, Relationships Development Intervention, made a casual comment at some training once that really resonated with me, which was every time you do something to a child without involving a parent, you suggest that you can do better and that you are the only one who should. This coupled along with the Hannon philosophy, for those of you who don't know it, it's about empowerment, capacity building and training of parents, showed us how crucial empowering and capacity building of the families is to the success of intervention. A caveat on this, though, is that Parents shouldn't expect that they have to do this or that they're made to do this. It is about building relationships and about building successes so that it becomes natural and part of their everyday routine and not something that they've got to go and do their homework. That's really, really important. Clinicians need to understand the importance of developing and maintaining those relationships with the families as well. If they're created and the families feel supported by those clinicians, then there's much greater outcomes for a child. The third principle, that the primary role of the service provider in intervention is to work with and support the family members and carers in a child's life. Again, this principle is focusing on the requirement to develop relationships between the therapist and the parent and the carer. One of the greatest and most exciting things about telecare is that this positively creates those relationships. As I said in the previous slide, the therapist they can't step over, they can't pick up the pieces and manipulate a child's hands, they can't make them make the sound. The person who is sitting there beside them is the one that has to do that. At its very best, as I say here, it creates a team where the support person, be it mum or the early childcare or the teacher's aide, can zig and zag together. The trust is built and the support is provided once more in a natural and inclusive environment. So parents can work on those skills at home, so can the teacher within the school environment to provide an inclusive learning opportunities. It's very interesting. This takes time to develop and quite a bit of time to make sure that those relationships are strong and the ability to predict what might happen in a session. Ideally, what we would love to do is have all the support people who our therapists work with, be they school, preschool, even parents, down here with us and establish some relationships with the therapists, practice some sessions with those therapists, and really enhance and develop those relationships. Of course, funding at the root of all of this prevents a lot of this happening, but it is truly about being able to facilitate relationships that makes that change. One of the things that it has done for us is it's actually pushed forward our working from home policy, and to really develop that. We have a number of young therapists who are having babies or at home with small children who are now able to work from home and deliver therapy sessions to continue to deliver therapy sessions a couple of times a week, if that's what they would like to do, and still be able to care for their children at home. So it's meant that the best of both worlds is found. Kids can continue to see their therapists, and the therapists have that nice life balance. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. The fourth principle, that the early intervention process, and by the very means we've been talking about, not just early intervention, but the whole process, from an initial context through to transition, must be dynamic and individualised. And I think the key word there is individualised, to reflect each child and family member's preferences, learning styles and cultural beliefs. And this requires an extraordinary amount of organisation and effort from an organisation to make this happen. It doesn't happen naturally, it doesn't happen easily. Telecare supports that principle, the delivery through its delivery modalities. So as we spoke about before, families and parents having to take children out of school, drive lots of miles to access services. This means that they don't have to do that. It's flexible, so as to sustain that engagement. So you can have services at 8 o'clock in the morning before you go to school. You can have those services at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Probably not the best time of the day, but sometimes it's the only time that you can hit a traditional therapist. So sometimes that's what might work for your family. It might work. One of the things we're again looking at developing is possibly doing some work on weekends so that people could access it on a Saturday morning, for instance, when the other children are off at sport, they could do their session. It means that you also have greater commitment to the therapy service because it's not as exhausting and difficult to be able to access and get there. We also recognise that some of these delivery modalities are really difficult for instance, our Aboriginal families. We know that we cannot just arrive in a community and expect there to be uptake. So we have looked very carefully at how we engage with those communities. We have put in place an agreement with First People Disability Network. So they, in fact, go out into communities before we come out and do community consultations to discuss how what the needs of that community are and what might be some solutions that we could possibly provide. This was particularly pertinent for when we went out to Broken Hill and Wilcannia. The project officer Aboriginal project officer who came out there actually drove and collected people from homes and brought them in. So they were really keen to have that engagement and that community networking with us. That has led to the setting up of a telecare hub in Broken Hill for families to be able to go in there and access services being delivered from Sydney. We find that supporting that child's needs was so well supported, and one of the comments that I was talking about from surveys before was that through our interactions with other providers, the child is so much more comfortable being able to do this in our house, in our home. The clinicians have adapted more to what he needed. Sessions were flexible. We could move and be free in an environment where he was relaxed and comfortable. I think that's a really important key to the delivery via telecare, that there is that element of comfort for both parent and child. Fifth principle, the individual family service plan outcomes must be functional and based on children's and families' needs and priorities. I think it is too easy to have goals that are not appropriate or too big or clinically based rather than a family's needs. So, being able to make sure they're functional and based on that child's needs is not unique to Windmill. It's the basis, as I say, not only of early intervention, but actually a key driver of the NDIS. And it's really rather pleasing to see that this EI principle has been adopted by the NDIS for all people. We really work hard at making sure that the goals are functional and that it's the family's priorities rather than the therapists. We have developed a service planning script that families, that our service planner talks through with families from the very first time we make contact with them, having received their parent carer questionnaire. The other thing about making this functional is that it's really crucial to changing trajectories for children. Their functional outcomes are not necessarily a developmental outcome, but they mean that that child can participate more fully within their community and family. Learning to use a spoon, for instance, may not be high on a therapist's goals, but to a family, that as in this gorgeous picture that is illustrating this, that little boy can use a spoon to beat the cake batter, to stir his porridge, to ice his cupcakes, to eat his dinner, as his sibling is doing, makes him a very much part of that community and much part of that family. Goal setting, as I said, is crucial to this. And as I referred to, we look very carefully at a number of places where that goal setting can, we can work with the families. Those goals are not set in cement, so the family may find after some time that that goal is their goal has changed for that child. Not necessarily that they have actually achieved that goal, but there's something else that's become more pressing than something else. Again, a comment from a family, which I think, you know, as part of your QI is what drives service, was the clinicians met with us at the start. We'd never had that experience before. We've had parent meetings and then you go off and do different things. And this interdisciplinary program, the family says, you can see that the clinicians talk to each other, but actually having that meeting is really, really good. I feel calm, I feel like I have a direction, and I can see what the services are that we need at this point and what other services we may need in the future. So that functionality was a key to that family, making their week an important and positive outcome-based one. Our sixth principle, that the family's priorities, needs and interests are addressed most appropriately by a primary provider who represents and receives team and community support. This is a very interesting concept and one that is getting a little diluted with the way the funding streams are at the moment. But it is key to positive outcomes. We do base our model on that principle. We work wherever possible with local clinicians. Families may access a service for just one session, one discipline, speech for instance, or OT. They might be accessing a speech pathologist at home, but not necessarily anything else. So that therapist would chat with the family, and if they were happy to agree with it, the OT who was delivering OT sessions would ring the speech in and discuss how that had proven to be successful, and how those strategies might be incorporated into speech sessions. This is very much a long-standing organisational principle, so not just about children who are attending a windmill program, but right across our organisation. Very interestingly, families actually, again, in the survey, said that they would really value having the time to spend more time talking with clinicians and being able to link those services together. So one of the new things we're developing is a portal that the families will be able to access at any time, that will have on there their child's sessions, snippets, highlights of those sessions that they can look at and can share with other service providers that they might be working with, taking the pressure off the families and off our therapists, and having a resource there that's a really useful resource that the families can use at any time. 7, that interventions with not just young children, any children, And family members must be based on explicit principles, validated practices, best available research, and relevant laws and regulations. This is part of our clinical governance framework and absolutely not to be dismissed. We have encouraged and really made sure this is embedded within our services. Regular clinical discipline meetings where new ideas, programs are discussed and evaluated. The clinical supervision is an essential component of what Royal Far West delivers in a safe and quality atmosphere at Royal Far West. Every staff member has access to effective and appropriate clinical supervision throughout their time here. This provides the opportunity to reflect on and review practice, discuss individual cases, change or modify practices and identify training and continual development needs, reviewing of professional standards, keeping up to date with developments in professions, identify those professional training and development needs, ensure that they're working within professional codes and conduct boundaries. I really can't emphasize enough how important this process is to ensuring that we are delivering high quality services. The clinical supervision takes place frequently. It's worked out with the team leaders. It's determined by each clinical lead, I should say, but it must be sufficient to ensure safe and competent care for the children who use our services and in line with the industry standards. So it is really, as I said, a really important part of what we deliver. This, of course, is currently unfunded and the organisation's philanthropic meets it at the moment. Excuse me. Sorry for that. Final principle, not listed as an early intervention principle, but probably really crucial to making things work, is don't reinvent the wheel. There are some amazing resources out there. The first one that's just coming up on your screens there is the First Peoples Disability Network planning tool. This is specific for working with Indigenous and Aboriginal children and families. It is absolutely wonderful. You can see that their symbol for disability is the in the centre of there, the sort of the half leg with the circles around it. They have stickers that people can lift and move and put into each of their planning. There is training available that First Peoples Disability Network provide to organisations as to how to use this, and I would highly recommend any organisation that is working with Aboriginal and families, Torres Strait Islander families, that they look at investing in this training. It is unbelievable, actually, at how great it is. And then we have the wonderful Pictability, which is produced by Plumtree here in Sydney. That is an incredible kit, visual board really, of families being able to work out what their goals are and visualise them for the first time. I think one of the really difficult things for families is when they have they're confronted with this question, so what are your goals? What do you want? And you know, they scramble around and say, oh, well, you know, I think well, communication's really important, and being able to go to school. Very wide goals, and this wonderful Pictability allows them to look at those wider long-term goals, but also how to create short and medium-term goals, and not just about the child. They have a lovely saying, which is family, child and self. So it's also about the goals for that parent or those parents that are undertaking that. again, really beautiful capacity building, empowerment tools, both of them, that allow families to really fly, which I think is a wonderful, and if they're well and supported, then they're able to support their children to a much greater extent than if they're not. So, issues. Well, I'm not going to say where do we start because there's lots of positive, and I've just spent 8 slides telling you all the positive things, but there are quite a few issues. Broadband and connectivity is a big one. It is unfortunately very true that many areas do not have reliable internet and reliable internet with reliable connectivity. Broadband, the width of what they're able to use is also extremely limited, and data virtually non-existent. We still have families who are using satellite for their broadband, which creates huge problems. We know that early childcare centres are really struggling just trying to submit their early childcare claims, because by the time they get their PROTA number, the screen is timed out. So delivery of telecare requires that you have really good, strong connectivity. So solution to that, what we've looked at doing is trying to tech enable lots of different areas. So we have a bus, a Healthy Kids bus, that goes out to different communities. It now is tech enabled on that bus so that we can deliver therapy to children via telecare in 2 different clinic rooms that we have in our bus. We're hoping to be able to develop that further and look at some partnerships with some organisations and councils that we can, if we tech enable them, that we'll be able to use their premises to deliver therapy to families. Obviously, being able to get to central areas so that families are not having to travel, which kind of defeats the purpose of having telecare. Though our rural families are very beautiful, and they tell me that half an hour's just down the road, so that's okay. But when it gets to 2 hours, that's a bit far. So half an hour we're aiming for. Aboriginal engagement. It has been a problem until we brought on First Peoples Disability Network and their incredible project officers there that have really facilitated that. The long-term engagement with these communities requires the time to build trust and the time to build relationships, more so than in any other field. Again, using organisations like First Peoples Disability makes a huge difference. Excuse me. The Aboriginal medical services also are really good, and they are also very keen to be able to facilitate the delivery of telecare into their areas. The other essential thing is maintaining a presence in the community. So where I was talking about Broken Hill and having the hub there, that's a presence that we have, and people know that Royal Far West is there via Skype, via GoToMeeting, is in that building that they can come in and access and book their therapy sessions in. The support people in preschools and schools can be is going to become an issue. It has been a couple of schools have found it difficult when they're paying for the support person out of their school budget, and they're there to support many children and they're being withdrawn to only support one. And there's some pushback against that. So we need to think long term about how we can create a solution for that. So we're certainly encouraging parents to volunteer to be that support person in the wherever they're getting the service. We also sell the concept that we are providing, or the child session is actually providing professional development to that support person who can not only work with that little person who's getting the service inclusively within the classroom, but with other children that may also have similar issues. They can they have the access, they're able to access the expertise of that support person. And we think that's a really important and in-kind support that the schools can offer. So that's sort of the way we're looking at it. The cost of key clinicians to organisations or key workers, whatever the title is, really can be quite expensive as well. There's so many hours, I think, that we all know that is organisations give to families that is not costed. We need to have this cost recognised, so the supervision and the mentoring of staff needs to be recognised. And my solution was possibly add it to plans, a bit like support coordination that is in there for older people with NDIS plans, that there's a mentoring and support aspect to a child's plan that can be provided to organisations that are doing that. It's the supervision and mentoring is also part of that, as I've just alluded to. It's also a huge issue for rural and remote families who may possibly only be able to access allied health assistance. So as part of those models, supervision and mentoring is crucial. They can't, that model does not exist without that component. And again, that must be built into the costing for the allied health assistance, which we have raised and submitted to the price review. But it is something that is being missed, and organisations can't continue to maintain that cost. And finally, a word from the parent. Before the final word on the parent, the evaluation that we've just done, as I was saying to you, you can see the statistics there yourself, that, you know, they were 87% of the parents reported that made them feel more competent as a parent, that they all felt that they would recommend it, that they all reported that they looked at the whole child, that they worked well with the staff. So we have come a long way in being able to meet that very key principle of capacity building. We do, of course, always have a way to go, and until I get 100% of families agreeing that it was good value for their money, I won't be happy, but I'll cop 84.8%, whatever it was, and be happy with that. But I think it's a pretty good place to start. And as I just said, the final word from the parent, because I think this really shows when you do utilise those principles and make them part of your everyday service delivery, quotes like these are just invaluable to staff morale and to service morale, that we know that we're doing the right thing and providing services that are making a difference. So thank you very much.